What is epilepsy? The World Health Organization defines epilepsy as a chronic, non-communicable disease of the brain that is characterized by recurrent, unprovoked seizures due to disturbed nerve cell activity. A seizure involves brief periods of involuntary movement that may affect the entire body or only particular parts of the body. What is the etiology of epilepsy? The cause of epilepsy is complex and often multifactorial. The following etiologies result in disturbed nerve cell activity in the brain, contributing to epileptic seizures. Brain trauma and damage, which may be a consequence of a stroke, brain tumour, or AV malformations. Genetic malfunction. Often individuals with epilepsy have damaged GABA or NMDA receptors. Infections of the brain, such as meningitis. Metabolic and immune disorders, for example, hyponatremia and CNS vasculitis. Idiopathic. 50% of individuals suffering from epilepsy do not know the cause of their disease. Around the world, approximately 50 million people are living with epilepsy, making it one of the most common neurological diseases globally. Epilepsy is non-discriminatory, affecting all genders, races, and social classes. In Australia, epilepsy is the second most burdensome neurological condition following dementia, accounting for 14.6% of the burden of disease of all neurological conditions. In 2019 to 20, there'll be an estimated 142,000 people living with epilepsy in Australia. This table further shows that the prevalence of epilepsy between males and females is very similar. Epidemiological data demonstrates that Indigenous Australians are burdened with higher rates of many chronic illnesses. Data demonstrates that epilepsy is more prevalent in Indigenous Australians compared to non-Indigenous Australians, and this difference can be attributed to higher rates of infectious diseases and reduced access to healthcare within these communities. In 2011, neurological conditions were responsible for 4% of total burden among Indigenous Australians. Majority of this burden was attributed to epilepsy, at 35.4% of burden of disease under neurological conditions. Therefore, it is extremely clear that epilepsy is more of a burden in Indigenous communities in comparison to non-Indigenous communities. Neurons communicate with each other via action potentials and chemical neurotransmitters, which is necessary to process and transmit information. Neurotransmitters are responsible for either exciting or hindering the neuron from firing its action potential. Gamma-aminobutyric acid, GABA, is an inhibitory neuron transmitter that inhibits the generation of an action potential due to the influx of chlorine ions. Glutamate is the major excitatory neurotransmitter in the nervous system. NMDA is the primary receptor that responds to glutamate, allowing an influx of sodium, potassium, and calcium into the postsynaptic cell, causing depolarization and thus exciting the neuron. A balance between excitatory and inhibitory neurons is imperative to maintain physiological homeostasis. The pathophysiology of epilepsy is diverse. A commonality across epilepsies is due to dysfunctional neurological receptors. During seizures, neurons are synchronously active, where clusters of neurons become temporarily impaired and sudden excitatory signals occur. These are referred to as paroxysmal electrical discharges, which occur due to dysfunctional receptors. Patients with epilepsy have fast or long-lasting activation of NMDA receptors due to mutations in the GABA receptors. Therefore, they are unable to inhibit action potentials. As a result, GABAergic signaling is downregulated and glutamatergic is upregulated, generating too many action potentials which results in a seizure. There are different signs and symptoms of epilepsy according to the particular area of the brain that is exhibiting abnormal nerve impulses. Common signs include muscle twitches and spasms in one limb or muscle on one side of the body. This is due to the upregulation of glutamate and the downregulation of GABA neurotransmitters in only one single area of the brain in one cerebral hemisphere. Seeing and hearing things that are non-existent due to impaired nerve signaling in the temporal lobe, which has the important function of responding to auditory stimuli. Lack of awareness and memory loss following a seizure is related to abnormal neural firing in the temporal lobe, particularly the parahippocampal gyrus, which has an important function in memory. Loss of consciousness, which is a dramatic clinical manifestation of temporal lobe seizures. This is a cause of excessive neural synchronization between the thalamus and associated cortices in temporal regions. Common symptoms include tickling, crawling, and numbing sensations in a body part, a consequence of dysfunctional neurological receptors in the primary somatosensory cortex. And finally, altered sight and vision associated with the upregulation of glutamate and the downregulation of GABA receptors within the occipital lobe, which includes the primal visual cortex. It should be noted that there are many different clinical signs and symptoms related to epilepsy, and each of these are related to the area of the brain that has abnormal neural firing.